Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into a truly staggering extreme weather event today. We're going to look closely at the July 27th disaster that absolutely shattered the Fox Cities region in Wisconsin. We're going on a dramatic, chronological journey through this whole thing, from the very first atmospheric warning signs right through to the chaotic aftermath. We'll see exactly how a completely normal summer day transformed into a nightmare in a matter of minutes, how emergency crews reacted when the entire grid went down, and what it actually takes for a community to get back on its feet after being brought to its knees. A midday sky turns to midnight. Now, that isn't hyperbole. That is exactly what happened. We're talking about an extremely dangerous tornado emergency tearing right through the heart of Wisconsin. In just mere moments, entire neighborhoods were literally leveled, heavy vehicles were tossed around like toys, and tens of thousands of people were instantly plunged into pitch black. This was the high-stakes reality for folks in the Fox Cities. Part 1. The Gathering Storm. Let's break this down chronologically. It was just after noon on Monday, July 27th. You had this massive buildup of summer heat and heavy humidity sweeping through northeastern Wisconsin. It was essentially acting as rocket fuel for the atmosphere. The National Weather Service in Green Bay had been carefully tracking this specific storm cell, but honestly, no one quite anticipated exactly how fast it was going to organize and intensify right over a heavily populated area. The timeline here reveals the sheer panic of the day. At 11:59 a.m., the initial tornado warning goes out for the Fox Cities region. Just minutes later, the situation degrades so rapidly that the NWS has to escalate their warning, and by exactly 12:15 p.m., tornado touchdown is officially confirmed on the ground near Appleton and Menasha. Just think about that for a second. We're talking barely 15 minutes from the first siren to a massive funnel cloud actively destroying homes. That's almost zero time for residents to process the threat, grab their families, and get to a basement. So a crucial point here is understanding the term PDS, particularly dangerous situation. The NWS does not throw this term around lightly. It's a really rare, second highest level designation. When they escalate a warning to a PDS, they're signaling, hey, this is no ordinary summer storm. This is imminently life-threatening. It means the radar is showing something absolutely monstrous, and anyone in its path needs to take cover right that second. No hesitation. To really grasp what that felt like on the ground, listen to this eyewitness account from Greg Van Driest. He was working in downtown Appleton as the storm rolled in. He said, "The word we all were using was ominous. You looked outside and you thought it was 3 in the morning. It was that dark. Can you imagine? Standing in your office just after lunch, looking out the window and the sky is entirely pitch black? That profound darkness was the only visual warning a lot of people had before the wind hit." Phase 2, touchdown and impact. The storm is no longer just a warning on a radar screen. It's a very real, physical, destructive force on the ground. 40. That is the number I want you to focus on right now. This tornado was moving southeast at a relentless 40 miles per hour. It tore right across the northern end of Lake Winnebago, moving with incredible momentum. And it stayed on the ground for at least 20 agonizing minutes. Just picture 20 minutes of a massive funnel cloud grinding through Appleton and Menasha at 40 miles per hour before it finally dissipated over the water. That is a massive, relentless path of destruction. When the National Weather Service came in to survey, they gave this monster a preliminary rating of an EF2 tornado. Now, if you weren't familiar with the enhanced Fujita scale, an EF2 means we're dealing with estimated peak winds of at least 111 miles per hour. That specific threshold is absolutely crucial. At 111 miles per hour, we aren't just talking about a few loose shingles blowing off a roof or, some lawn furniture getting tossed around. We're talking about winds entirely capable of causing significant damage and total structural failure to well-built homes. Which brings us to part 3, ground zero devastation. When the skies finally cleared and the violent winds stopped howling, the true horrifying scale of this disaster became painfully obvious. We have to look at what was actually left behind. The sheer force we're dealing with here is mind-boggling. The city of Menasha essentially became ground zero, which prompted Mayor Austin Hammond to immediately declare a local state of disaster. The reality of an EF2 strike is just devastating. Roofs and siding were completely ripped from residential homes. Commercial buildings were reduced to literally nothing but their outer walls. Heavy vehicles were found flipped and overturned on the sides of the roads, all while the Appleton Police Department was simultaneously dealing with massive downed trees completely blocking the highways. The human element of this destruction is just staggering. In one Menasha neighborhood, sitting just blocks from the shores of Lake Winnebago, the tornado completely ripped apart a local laundromat, a bakery, and a neighborhood tavern. A witness there, Heather Schroeder, described the pure terror of the moment.
She said, "There's nothing left. I heard cracking and popping all around. Rescue workers pulled someone out of one of the buildings. Entire livelihoods, real neighborhood staples, just vanished in the span of a few deafening minutes."
And compounding all of this structural devastation was the absolute collapse of the local infrastructure. Over 18,000 customers lost power in Outagamie County and another 15,000 plus in neighboring Winnebago County. But the most alarming part was in Menasha. Because of a major down transmission line, officials believed the entire city, all 18,000 residents, was plunged into a complete blackout, a total grid failure. Officials were warning it could be days before the lights even came back on. Part 4, the emergency response. With the storm past, but the dangers still very, very present, the focus shifted immediately to the emergency response. First responders, police, fire, and public works crews from Menasha, the village of Fox Crossing, and neighboring agencies had to flood into these highly dangerous, debris-filled streets. Menasha Police Chief Matthew Albrecht had to get incredibly clear, rapid directives out to the public to keep people alive during this chaotic aftermath. First up, shelter in place and stay inside. The streets were basically an obstacle course of live downed power lines and impassable roads. Second, if you aren't a resident, stay away. They absolutely could not afford disaster tourists clogging up the routes needed for emergency vehicles. And third, and this was heavily emphasized, conserve water immediately. Why? Because the power grid failure was so absolute that both water plants serving the city of Menasha were completely without power. There's a quote from Winnebago County Executive Gordon Hintz that really sums up the indiscriminate, cruel nature of a disaster like this. He noted, "Obviously, when you look at the damage, Mother Nature doesn't really care. All storm warnings that could be made ahead of time to get people to safety were activated." The sobering truth here is that the community and the meteorologists essentially did everything right. The tracking was there, the sirens went off, the PDS was issued, but when an EF2 tornado decides to grind through a city center, all the preparation in the world can only protect lives, it can't protect the buildings themselves. The response itself was this massive collaborative effort. Outagamie County Executive Tom Nelson confirmed reports of collapsed buildings, which meant crews had to actively search through the rubble for trapped victims while simultaneously trying to secure the scene. Miraculously, though, as of Monday evening, officials reported 0 confirmed fatalities. On the state level, Governor Tony Evers was quickly briefed and confirmed the state was ready to deploy assistance. Meanwhile, locally, emergency shelters were rapidly opened up, and area hotels began offering discounted rates just to help the thousands of newly displaced residents find a safe place to sleep. Which brings us to our final chapter, rebuilding and resilience. The storm itself only lasted 20 minutes, but the long-term outlook for the Fox Cities region, both the physical cleanup and the emotional toll, is going to stretch on for a very long time. There is such a profound contrast to highlight here. On one hand, you have the immense physical toll. The National Weather Service faces long surveys to calculate the exact property and infrastructure damage. Entire livelihoods have been paused. Homes are just gone. But on the other hand, standing in stark defiance to all that destruction is the community spirit. We're seeing neighbors pulling together to clear debris, emergency responders working 24/7 on zero sleep, and a shattered community completely refusing to stay down. The Appleton disaster proved that even under the darkest of skies, there's an incredibly resilient hope. So I want to leave you with this final vital thought. When the skies turn dark in your town, is your community prepared to weather the storm? We saw today how a normal afternoon can literally vanish in 15 minutes. Does your family know what to do if a PDS warning flashes on your phone? Does your city have the infrastructure to handle a massive, days-long blackout? It's a heavy question, but it's one the Fox Cities had to answer the hard way. Take this explainer as a reminder of nature's sheer power and a prompt to make sure you're ready when the sirens sound. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible event. Stay safe out there and keep learning.